Hey folks, Sean McCormick here. I know I haven't been on for the past couple of weeks and I missed last week's live stream because of scouting. It's going to be the same again tomorrow. I'll try and get something done in the morning, but I doubt it. But I've got a new pup to collect and all sorts of stuff going on. I haven't been around because I've been writing. I've been pretty solid at updating my book. But so what we're going to do today is just very briefly a Photoshop thing about retouching. I'm setting up an action for retouching and just showing you some of the additional stuff that I would have compared to what other people might have. So this is frequency separation based, but it's not based on Gaussian blur. It's based on dust and scratches. But let's just go and do it. So this is a bikini shot of Leanne. You've probably seen a bunch of these shots if you've been on the live streams. So I'm going to start off making duplicate copies and go from there. We're going to name them as I go for ease. All right. And so when I'm doing this, I'm actually going to be in here with layers. So it's going to new layer via copy, but I'm going to hold down the Option or Alt key at the same time, which will bring up the dialog box, which of course is going to the other screen. And we're going to call this, we can call this low frequency if you want, but I'm going to call it blur because that's what it is blur. Okay. And I'm going to duplicate that exactly the same way, but I'm going to use a shortcut. So it'll be Option Command J or Control Alt J. Again, same story, but I'm going to call this texture. All right. And because I'll turn this off so we can see what's going on. Actually, you know what? I'm setting this up as an action, so I'm going to start that again. And so we have an action. So the action panel is open here. And I'm going to click on to this retouch set is open, and I'm going to go new action. So that brings up the new action dialog. So I'm going to call this FS8 because it is for 8-bit files. And I'm going to call it D and S, dust and scratches. That's what I'm using. So that's pretty much it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to give it a color. And I'm just going to click record. And then, so we start off then. So we know the shortcut is Control Command J. And this is blur. And then the same again for texture. All right, we'll turn this off just so you can see what's going on as it's turned off. Obviously this is getting recorded as part of the action, but that's fine. So we're going to go, select the right one first of all. Noise, dust and scratches, dialogues on the other. We're just going to go for 10 pixels basically. Right, and then grab texture, and then with this we're going to go to image and apply image. This is the standard. This is the same as if you use Gaussian blur. You're clicking the blurred layer is what you want here, and you want it to be in subtract mode, scale of 2, offset of 128. Invert should be off. And you'll know it looks right because it looks like this gray layer with a little bit of edges in it. Because it is texture basically. So click OK, and then we come down here and turn that into linear light. And that gives us what we have before. But because these are the ones we're working off, we don't want to work off these, we want to work off copies of these. So select our blur layer. Just going to grab that for a duplicate. And I'm going to just rename it. Blur edit. There, and I'm going to clip it. So I'm holding down the Alt or Option key, and that you can see this turns into a square with a down arrow. So we're clipping these together, and I'm going to do exactly the same thing with texture. Edit layer. Okay, and then I'm going to clip it. But when we clip it, we notice that this gets suddenly sharper. That's because we've got a double layer of stuff going on. So we pull this out of linear light and back to normal. And that fixes that. Okay, so the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go to a curves adjustment layer, right? And I am going to turn this into color dodge. So this is get used for eyes, and I'm just going to invert that now because the mask is selected. So when I do Command I or Control I to invert, it reverses that, and I usually just paint that in the eyes. And then the last kind of layer that I'm going to set up here is I'm just going to go for new layer, and that should bring up the dialog. And in the dialog, I'm going to select the mode to be soft light, and you get this option to fill with natural color, so 50% gray. Click OK, and then we're going to rename that to D and B. So that would be our dodge and burn layer. Okay, so if you want, you can set up colors on these layers and things like that. But the idea with this is just that these give you the ability to do particular things. Now, there's been a little work done on this file already inside Lightroom, so some of the stuff isn't going to necessarily work the way you want it. Now, if we wanted a particular tool set up to start with, as part of the action, you would record a hand tool. So you press H for hand, right? And when you're in the hand tool first, and then you go and you press, say, B for brush, the brush gets selected. Now we do have a mixer brush set up here. So I'm just going to, and then I'm going to click on blur edit layer, and then I'm going to stop the recording. Okay. So that's now made. Now, so if I come over here to my actions in this little panel here, we can see we've got button mode. So button mode creates these little buttons, and so we can see this is, I made it purple. So that's FSA, just dust and scratches. All right. So I can test this all together by literally grabbing everything we've just created there and deleting it. And then we just come in and we press the button. And that's created all of our layers ready to go. All right. And we can, and like the brush was selected anyway, but so the idea with this is that we have a clean brush, and as we just paint and bits, we're able to kind of move around, and it just helps us kind of smooth out areas of skin. Now, in this case here, that work is probably mostly done. With the texture, like we'll just, so press J to get our healing brush. Now I'm just using the standard healing, not the spot healing. And so Option or Alt, and then as you can see that's still working. Even though we changed this back to normal, because it's clipped to the linear light, it acts as if it's linear light. So that's just letting you know that does that. But so for dodge and burn, what we're doing here is, again, B for brush for that. And we actually don't want the mixer brush, we actually want the ordinary brush, which is actually opening in the other screen there for some reason. Maybe if I move this over, it'll show up on the screen. Yeah, so just ordinary brush tool, 100% opacity, 5% flow. You can change the flow if you want, or if you want, you can just have really low opacity and full flow. And the idea with this is that we can come in here, and so it's currently on white. So if you don't have this black and white set up here, you press D for default, and you press X to swap between them. So basically we're just going to enhance the highlight areas. So areas that you want to kind of bring out, I'm going to make brighter. So like the forehead would get it, the nose would get it, the cheeks under here. And now I'm just being super quick with this. This is just showing this basically. And then click X to get the areas you want darker, which is around the forehead. This contour area underneath here as well, just to darken down around the chin. Under the lips, like the bottom of the lips here. And I'm going to press X again because I'm going to do the top of the lips with white just to get a little bit more highlight there. If we turn this on and off, doesn't look like much has happened, but when you turn it on and off, you can see that it's making a big difference. Now, if you're not happy with the way that is there, you have two things you can do. You can go filter, blur, Gaussian blur. And what you can do is you can soften it, so you can see that soften the edges of it. And then you can also come down here, and with your opacity, you can just pull it back a little bit. So folks, that is me setting up a new action for the retouches that I'm doing. I wanted to have the clipping. I had the basic frequency separation being done there, but I also wanted to have the dodge and burn come up as part of it. And I want to do the eye thing as well. Actually, let's jump to the eye thing for a second here, and I'll show that to you. So that's the curves layer here. And so this, we're going to need our flow back up the whole way. But what normally for this, I put the opacity at 20%. Now, I could just press 2, and that'll go to 20% as well. So 2, 3, 4, 5, do the variations on it, right? So they do now here is I'm literally going to paint in the eyes. Okay. So what happens here is these eyes, it's subtle, right? Sometimes eyes are very, very, very dark. Let me just zoom in even a little bit more so you can see that a bit better. It's starting to look unsharp at this level though. What are we at? 100%? Yeah. No, I could probably do it a little bit sharper. Anyway, but you can see it there. If you have a situation where you find that it's not as bright as you want, what you can do is you can actually grab up and you can pull up the middle of the curve. But normally you don't need to do anything with the curve. With blue eyes, you definitely don't need to do anything with the curve. All right. So that is kind of the layer for setting this up. And so, yeah. So hopefully that's useful. I mean, this is really good for stuff. The settings for mixer brush that I'm using there, which is all the 30s and stuff like that, and 120. So we have a clean brush, and we've just like that's off, and this is clicked. That gives you a clean brush each time. And so it's wet, load, mixer 30, and flow is 20. I think they came from Prince Mason. Yeah, I just was watching this stuff ages ago, and that's where they came from as well. Now, normally, let me just jump back here for a second. There's two things you can do. You can use the mixer brush, what we've shown there, but also another thing you can do is you can actually use the lasso tool. And so you lasso around an area, and then you would use Gaussian blur. I'm going into Gaussian blur specifically because I need to change this. And we'd use it as 10, which matches what you had before. And so that helps you even out areas as well. So that's just another option as well. So folks, yeah, it's easy to set up the action. Just follow the instructions there and you've got an action for retouching, and away you go. All right, thanks for watching.